yours. Thank you so much. And we will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Ellen and Tanya. I'm so glad to be here with you all. I'm zooming in from Connecticut, and I was sharing with Ellen and Tanya. I work at Synapticure, which I'll explain in a little while. So I work with people living with Parkinson's disease across the country, including Alabama, and it's such a pleasure to be able to provide care to people living in many different areas of the country. So I'm really glad I already feel a kinship to Alabama as I've been working with some folks there and just glad to be here with you today. So I'm going to share my slides and like Tanya said, you'll all have access to them today. And I'm hoping today we can do some back and forth. It'll be a little bit experiential, especially toward the second half. We'll be doing some exercises where you can practice some stress reduction and resilience building skills. And so we can use the chat or you can come on and ask questions, whatever works best for you, so that this feels interactive. All right, I'm going to begin. So this topic is really important, right? When we're thinking about mental health and resilience for anybody, but especially for people living with Parkinson's and their care providers, really want to focus on how do we enhance people's quality of life and work on skills so that each day there are things to focus on that bring joy and a quality of life. So I just want to talk to you briefly about Synapticure, if you're not familiar with us. So Synapticure has been founded in 2021 by Brian Wallach and his partner Sandra. And they founded, is someone living with ALS, but Sandra and Brian really wanted to improve access to neurology care for people across the country living with different neurodegenerative disorders, including Parkinson's disease, ALS, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, PSP and Huntington's and some other neurodegenerative conditions. And so the idea that we can provide virtual access to people from remote areas to people living in cities, and also working closely with different advocacy organizations to really provide services in a comprehensive way. This just came out from Ray Dorsey on Saturday, meeting with Brian and Sandra Arbavaya, our co-founders, in terms of why Synapticure is so special in terms of being able to access Parkinson's disease specialists in a short amount of time and to get comprehensive care. So if you enroll in Synapticare, you can still work with your providers. And so that doesn't mean you can't have a local neurologist. We partner with local clinics and neurologists, but you have ongoing access to a neurologist and also care coordination to assess speech, neuropsych, counseling. We also have clinical trials that we're partnering with, and we have a team that helps with prior authorizations and navigating insurance. I'm one of the psychologists, so I've been at Synapticare since 2023 and have had the fortunate opportunity to work with people living with neurodegenerative conditions and their care partners. So we provide individual and family support. So I work sometimes just with spouses or partners, and also do groups. I run a variety of different groups at Synapticure to help benefit our clients, including a mindfulness group, a resilience toolbox group, which you'll see a couple of the pieces I'm going to introduce are from that group, and essentially really partnering with people on their care journey. So we have something called a collaborative care model for mental health, where the neurologist is at the head, right? You can see in the top slide here. And then we have a behavioral health care manager who's an RN or LCSW, social worker. And we also have a consulting psychiatrist. The patient and care provider is always at the center. And then I'm one of the consultants. And so I work with many clients on their journey to help them manage depression, anxiety, coping, adjustment, grief, loss, you name it. And also families that are helping to support their loved ones. And so it's really important work to think about the mental health part of living with a condition like Parkinson's, not just the physical. So that's really my passion. Okay, so that was a little overview of where I am and a little bit about my experience. So today we're going to talk about why mental health and resiliency matter in Parkinson's, and then get into this is kind of where I geek out a little bit about the science. I won't go deep into the weeds, but we're going to talk about our nervous system. Because really, when we're talking about resiliency and mental health, we're talking about our nervous system and how to regulate it. I am a very practical therapist, right? And I really like to think about what can I help someone with so that they feel better in the moment when they're feeling really stressed. So we'll have some practical techniques today. And then this idea of how do we create like a home plan that really focuses on mental health? And it doesn't take that much to begin to build a toolbox. So that will be my theme throughout our talk today is it doesn't take that much. And we can just do a few things each day to build up our resiliency. All right, so I'm going to say things that you are probably very familiar with, but I like to sort of set the stage for the techniques and interventions that I'm going to share. So, as many of you are familiar with, depression and anxiety are common in Parkinson's disease, right? Anytime we're working with the brain and changes in the brain, it can impact mood, emotion regulation, and it can create anxiety, right? Create anxiety in our system, anxiety about the unknown, anxiety about changes that are happening. And so, what we do know from lots and lots of research over the past several decades is the impact of emotional health on life, right? That when we can help people improve their emotional health, it improves their daily life, the quality of life, and often some of the physical functioning as well. And throughout this, I want to weave in how important it is for care partners as well. Because when when we're talking about depression and anxiety being common in Parkinson's, they're common in care providers, as you all know as well. And so this theme of both helping our person living with Parkinson's and then our care providers, it's really essential. And that's one of my passions. Like, how do we make sure the whole system is functioning well or at its very best? And so if a care partner is struggling, we want to make sure that that person is getting the supports they need. And it's often the care partner that, maybe doesn't have time to attend to their own mental health. I work with a lot of people. All of our work is remote. And so I've had many care providers say, I could not go out and leave my partner alone for an hour or 2 or 3 to drive. So being able to just remotely take care of my mental health for an hour or go sit and I have a client I work with, her husband's living with Parkinson's and the only space that's quiet in her house is her bathroom. So she sits in the bathroom and we have this session and she knows her husband can knock on the door if he needs anything. But that even that hour of bathroom space to be able to work on her own mental health has been critical for her. So here's my little science part, and I promise it'll be brief. As you all know, Parkinson's affects the dopamine system in the brain, and that can produce changes in the mood, right? Just dopamine fluctuations impact mood, also impacts motivation, thinking, cognition, and then this part, which is stress regulation. And that may be newer to some of you. Not just the fact that it can create changes in mood and cognition, but actually how the brain adapts to stress. And if the brain is not regulating well when there's stress coming into the system, we'll often see people get really anxious, right? Or really struggle with being able to focus. So, nervous system regulation is really, really helpful. And the good news is we can learn tools to do that. So, even if the brain is struggling to do some nervous system regulation, we can teach ourselves how to regulate more effectively. And what many of you have experienced probably is that when you've had an increase in stress, it can affect motor symptoms, increased tremor, for example. One of the most common things my patients tell me, right? When I'm anxious, my tremors are worse, which then makes me more anxious, right? So we can kind of see that pattern that, stress, external or internal, can increase a motor symptom, and then that can provide more anxiety to the system, which can then increase more symptoms. So we get caught in a loop. And also it can worsen non-motor symptoms like difficulty with motivation or difficulty initiating tasks, right? So resilience skills help because we can start to focus on regulating the nervous system. And so when we can emotionally regulate our nervous system, symptoms often can be, managed more effectively. Can help with sleep, energy, coping skills. And these skills can help people both living with Parkinson's and care partners. So I love to run groups, and I always invite care partners. And what I will often hear from care partners is like, oh, this group, yeah, I think it helped my partner, but actually it really helped me too. So I like to do things as a partnership because you already are in a partnership that, the techniques we're going to do are both for you and for your, care partner, because that system is really important. When one person is regulating their emotion system well, it really helps the other person, right? I don't know how many of you are watching. I've been watching that story of that little Japanese monkey, Punch. His name is Punch. And what I watch often when I see these little clips is how he had to regulate. He was rejected by his birth mom because of a really difficult birth, and so his caregivers at the zoo gave him a little stuffed animal, and he's been trying to regulate with that stuffed animal, and that does help soothe him. And over time, he's slowly acclimating, and he's beginning to regulate, and other monkeys are approaching him. But what you'll see over and over, if you ever watch these clips, is just how much soothing happens when someone, another monkey, comes and like hugs him. And you see, first the stuffed animal, which can't hug back, but now the older monkeys, when they come around him, he just visibly looks so relaxed. Well, just like us, right? We're the same way. When our partners are able to hold us emotionally, when they are feeling less stressed, we can co-regulate better. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Nervous System 101. So essentially, and this is a little bit of a simplification, but I really like the idea of this. We can think about that our nervous system has different states. There's a calm state. You can see that on the this part on the right here, where we feel calm and connected. It's usually, not always, but often when we're with somebody we like or love or care about, or our dogs, right? Or we're in nature. But there's a sense of calmness and connection. And when we're calm and connected, we're able to function well. It doesn't mean that there's no stress, but it means we can manage. It's like it's within our capability to manage the situation, right? So that's called the social engagement nervous system state. And then in the middle, if we're moving right to left, we have mobilization. And that's our fight flight response in our body. Some of you probably are familiar with that idea of fight, flight, freeze. So fight flight is that mobilization when our nervous system says, uh-oh, something's wrong. And it doesn't always mean something's dramatically wrong. It could even be like, oh, I'm gonna, go to a new doctor, right? And I'm excited about it, but I'm also a little bit nervous. So it can be a little bit of that nervous excitement too. But generally, when we're in that fight or flight feeling, it can feel kind of scary. We can feel adrenaline or cortisol, those stress hormones in our body. We might feel a little short of breath, anxious thoughts, feels like something's wrong, difficulty calming down. We feel pretty keyed up. These are all normal, right? By the way, it's not like one of these systems is wrong or bad. It's how we're wired as mammals, just like Punch the monkey. And the more that we can continue to work with our nervous system to move away from prolonged states of mobilization, we feel better, right? And then that last slide, the last part of the slide, immobilization, we freeze up. That's another nervous system response when we are very overwhelmed. So maybe we feel like we're going to be hurt in that moment, or we are shut down and just our system won't allow us to do anything. And with Parkinson's disease, that already happens at times, right? And so stress can exacerbate that. So our system goes back and forth between these different states. Ideally, we want to stay as much as we can socially engaged with maybe occasional mobilization. We want to avoid, if we can, the immobilization because that means the system is in a lot of distress. So our techniques are going to be focusing on how do we get from here to here, or how do we stay here more often, right? So these three states, the ventral vagal, which is that calm, connected state, the sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, and then the dorsal vagal is that shutdown, exhaustion, and numbness. Those are just the technical names. This comes from the research of a psychologist named Dr. Stephen Porges. he came up with a system of understanding our nervous system regulation called the polyvagal theory. And it's basically around this nerve that we have in our system called the vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve, goes from the back of the head all the way down to the gut, right? Has two branches, and it helps us with emotion regulation. So, stress in the body and the brain, we talked about this a little bit already. Stress can increase tremor, stiffness, fatigue, can impact sleep, concentration, and mood. So many people I work with, sleep can really be impacted when there's a lot of stress in the system, right? Insomnia, intermittent awakening, waking up at 4 in the morning, not being able to go back to sleep, right? And so when we're teaching regulation skills, essentially we're helping the brain recognize that everything is okay in this moment. So we're working on signaling safety so that the body and the brain can go back into that more safe and connected state. So how do we do this? How do we do this, right? It sounds like it's important, but what are the ways to do that? And is it I know it can sound like, well, that sounds pretty difficult to do, right? Here I am struggling with a neurodegenerative condition, or I'm a care partner on 24/7. The stress levels are very high. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, all of the things that are impacting everyone. And not just the disease, but living in the world, right? With all the things happening. And so it can feel like there's no way that I can manage this. So I want to emphasize that the techniques I'm going to lead today are simple, and they don't take a lot of time, but they do take some practice. And the good news is that small practices can help make changes over time. It doesn't take away the external stressors that are going on, of course, right? But we can teach our nervous system how to respond more effectively. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, probably got a hint when Ellen described my background a little bit, that I'm really passionate about mindfulness and integrative medicine modalities. So, mindfulness, paying attention to the breathing, noticing what's happening in the body, some of the things we've learned from the mindfulness research. And there are 25 or 30 years now of really good mindfulness research showing what happens in the brain and in the body when we regulate our breathing and when we focus our attention. And so I'm going to be talking about that along with some psychological strategies to help with our thinking and how we talk to ourselves. So we'll start with breathing first. So slow breathing can increase something called heart rate variability, HRV. This is very popular. So I don't know if you have an Apple Watch or an Aura ring. I have both because I'm really interested in like what's happening in my body. Or if you have a Stride PD watch, like any information you can get about HRV is very helpful. And what we know with HRV or heart rate variability is that when we have a higher heart rate variability, which means basically our heart rate is accommodating appropriately what's happening. So when we want to mobilize and get ready to do something, we need our heart rate to go up. And when we're not doing something that needs a lot of attention, we want our heart rate to go down. So good heart rate variability has lots of ups and downs, right? Even while we're sleeping, HRV is important. So every day I wake up and I look at my Aura ring, and some of you might look at Stride PD or one of your systems, and you can see what your HRV is and whether your sleep was effective or not. So having strong HRV can help with your overall resiliency. So we can do that in a number of ways, but we're going to talk today about slow breathing. And I'll explain what slow breathing is next. Okay, before we actually get to this practice, I want to say a little bit about slow breathing. There are many different practices. Many of you probably know this practice or box breathing. And essentially, there's different ways to do it. And actually, when people ask me like, "Oh, I do it this way," I'm like, "That's fine." It's not really critical to figure out the ratio or how many breaths or anything like that. What we're really aiming for is slowing the breath down. Generally, when we're breathing, we breathe about 14 to 16 breaths a minute. And if we're anxious, it's faster, right? Right. So if we're mobilized, goodness, we can be breathing really fast. So when we start to try to do slow breathing, we're essentially trying to slow that way down. And if we can get to more like 5 to 7 to 8 breaths a minute, like cutting that in half, and that doesn't have to be all the time, but especially when we're trying to learn these skills, it really helps with our heart rate variability and our nervous system regulation. When we're breathing, essentially, and when we're slowing our breathing, we're taking something that's involuntary, because breathing is involuntary. We don't think about it, we just do it. And we make it voluntary and we slow it down so that the brain recognizes, oh, we're breathing slowly. Okay, everything's okay. So then our brain sends that message back down the vagus nerve saying, everything's okay in the body. You don't have to you don't have to be tense. You don't have to get stressed. So this bi-directional conversation's happening when we slow our breathing down. Now, we don't know that that's happening, but our brain and our lungs are communicating. So I'd like to offer a practice to do together. And this is a simple one. And if it doesn't land for you, I'll give you a variation. But essentially, we're going to nicely and slowly breathe in to about a count of 4. If you notice that you're like at a 3, and you don't have any more room, that's fine. So just, a nice full breath in and then gently hold at the top of the breath and then slowly exhale. And if you can lengthen the breath a little longer than the in breath, that's great. Okay. The goal is just to slow the breathing down and pay attention. So don't worry so much about 4, 2, and 6. More, I want you to focus on a gentle breath in, hold at the top, long, slow breath out. And if you can, we're going to do this through our nose. When we breathe in and out through our nose, it helps to calm the nervous system down. So if you can, I'm going to do it in through the nose and out through the nose. Okay. So we'll do this for, I don't know, maybe I'll guide you for 2 minutes. Okay. And even if you've done this many times or this is brand new, be curious and see, all right, how does this affect me? And you might even notice before we actually start, like, how anxious are you feeling in this moment on a scale of 1 to 10? Just notice how mobilized am I? I know for me right now, because I'm presenting, I'm probably at maybe a 6 on the stress side. So I'm not completely stressed, but I can feel my kind of excitement and a little bit of mobilization, right? So see where you are. 1 being totally chilled out and 10 being really, really stressed. Okay. All right. So let's begin and I'll guide you through. So if you can, just to get into a comfortable seated position, feet on the floor if that's available. Let the body find a little bit of relaxation if you can. Relax your shoulders, relax your hands on your lap. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to inhale through the nose, hold at the top, and gently exhale all the way out. Nice and slow. Don't worry about the time. And then when you're ready, we'll do it again. In breath gently in. And then exhale, nice and slow, all the way out. Inhale in. And gently and softly breathing out. Breathing in. Maybe you notice a little bit more breath coming in. Pausing at the top. And gently breathing out, nice and slow, till you're all the way emptied out. We'll do 2 more rounds. Breath in. And softly release. And then 1 more round. Breathing in. And breathing out. And then relax and let go of the breath. All right. So I'm curious what you noticed. if anyone wants to share, if you want to put in chat or share about anything that you noticed during that breathing. Did your stress level go down? Did you notice anything? Any challenges? So feel free. I'll just drop the slides here for a moment. Feel free if there's anything that you noticed. I can feel in my own system. I was like at a 6. I'm probably maybe more at a 4 now. And what I often think about is that like we may not get to a 0 or a 1 in terms of having no stress in our system, but can we bring it down a little bit, even 2 degrees of less stress? Yeah, right. Ellen said she felt more relaxed for sure, less stressed. Great. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how in 2 minutes we can make a change in what is happening in our nervous system. Baby said I became more relaxed as we continued the breathing. I was able to inhale more breath each time. Love that. Thank you, Bibby. Because what we're actually doing, right? Our normal breath patterns can get pretty restricted, right? And over time, we can enhance our breathing capacity. And so we can actually literally practice breathing and we can take fuller breaths as we slow our breathing down. And so that's the cool thing. Even though breathing is an involuntary function, we can make it more and more conscious. Marjorie said calming and peaceful. Yeah, yeah. And so it doesn't take much for that switch of our nervous system state. Okay. And we're going to continue, but thank you for sharing, everybody, about that. Okay. So what I often say to people is, 2 minutes, 3 times a day, something like that. If you can stack it with something similar, like right before or after brushing your teeth, or, when you're in the morning, as you're before you have your morning breakfast, just these little moments of mindful breathing in the spring. I know here in Connecticut, it's finally getting warm. I know probably in Alabama it's been warmer. But in the morning, I like to sometimes just walk outside and listen to the birds and do like 2 minutes of mindful breathing. So these little rituals to start our day can make a shift. If you practice in the morning and you're deepening your breath a little bit, that has implications for the rest of the day too. So I'm a big fan of morning practice. So 2 minutes. Okay. So I want to offer a couple of other strategies. So that's the breathing one. There's many, many breathing techniques, but like I said, just slowing your breathing down is really going to do the trick in most cases. The second is a little bit more cognition, right? How can we help ourselves calm down? And so when we feel anxious, angry, frustrated, sad, often we just keep it inside. We may not even know what we're feeling. It can sometimes get, you know, misdirected, right? We could get irritable at our loved one. We feel frustrated if we're interrupted with something, right? So there's lots of feelings going on. And what researchers have found is that when we can actually name the feeling, pause and name the feeling, and even say it out loud to ourselves, it can reduce the emotional intensity. So there's a study, and the study really highlighted how important this very simple technique is. So what they put people in a functional fMRI scan, and they had them they were showing videos, pictures in the fMRI, and they had people name what they were feeling as they saw those different pictures. And what they saw was that people would have an emotional reactivity in their brain because they were looking at the blood flow. So the part of the brain that would get activated started to light up with a picture. Let's say it was a picture of a tornado or something scary. Could feel fear. And then if the person said fear is here or anxiety is here, when they started to name what was happening, there was an immediate reduction by 70% in their brain and what was happening in their brain. So the part of the brain that was lit up, the stress response part, started to quiet down and the frontal lobe started to go online again. So it helps to engage the brain when we start to name what's happening. So it is a very simple trick. Name it to tame it. I did not come up with that. This was a researcher named Daniel Siegel who does a lot of work on neurobiology and looking at what's happening in the brain. He came up with this idea, name it to tame it. And when we have really strong emotions or even mild emotions, just to name what's happening helps calm the brain down. And we can even enhance that more by doing some breathing when we do that, telling somebody that telling somebody that cares about us that you're feeling this way, then you get an added support, right? But the very simple task, name it to tame it. So try this, right? Try this, during the day today after the call. Like when you feel a feeling, just saying out loud, like, oh, there's anxiety here. Oh, there's whatever it is. And just notice what happens in your system. The goal is not to get rid of the feeling, although that would be nice, but we often can't do that. But if we can reduce the impact on the nervous system, that's what is the gold, right? That's what we're looking for right now. We want to have a nervous system that's more regulated. We can't control the stress. We can't make our feelings stop. And in fact, when we try to do that, it can actually make the feeling stronger. There's a famous saying in psychology, which is what we resist persists. We've got lots of these little pithy phrases. What we resist persists. So that's like the opposite of name it to tame it, because in name it to tame it, we're actually naming it, we're not resisting it, and that helps to process it and it helps other parts of the brain turn on. So this is a second practice, which is to pause, notice what's happening, name the emotion, and rate the intensity. Okay. So we can do this now too. All right. I'm going to invite you if you can, and I recommend if you can to close your eyes. We'll take a couple of breaths, just like we've been practicing, maybe 2 or 3 full, slow breaths. And then I'm going to invite you to just begin to notice what's happening in your body. Like, notice if you're carrying any tension in your body. Notice the temperature in your body. Are you warm or cool? Maybe noticing how you're sitting in the chair that's supporting you, noticing if you're comfortable or not comfortable. So just kind of taking a view of your body, like almost like you're doing a little exam. What's happening in my body? And then if you can, maybe you can even notice some emotions present. So for example, maybe if you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, you notice, oh, my chest is a little tight. My head is like, I have a little headache. Like things, I'm feeling a little distressed. So noticing in the body and also seeing if there are any emotions present. And then if you can, once again, rating that intensity. Is it a 5? Is it a 10? So this exercise, again, doesn't take a long time, but we're incorporating both this mindful awareness of what's happening in the body, naming the emotion if there is one, and then seeing if the intensity changes, right? And you can do this, several times, right? So if you meet a difficult emotion, you can pause, slow it down, notice how you're feeling in your body, and then rate the intensity. And it helps to see how a little bit of regulation can make a big difference. Okay. So when can you use these skills? These skills are really helpful. These are short practices, right? So you can use them before a medical appointment, for example, right? Feeling keyed up. When your symptoms are spiking, if you're noticing an increase in tremor or dystonia and you're feeling like, worried and you're noticing, very helpful to do that. Name it, to tame it, breathing, paying attention to the body. And then when you're having a conflict with somebody. So if you're in a interpersonal stressful moment, right? Maybe there's an argument, something's happening that you're not feeling good about with the person in front of you. It's so good to slow it down. And I often use that phrase when I'm working with people about like, can we slow it down? When we slow it down, we're helping our nervous system regulate so that we don't lose it. Because how many of us have had moments where we've lost it, gotten angry, irritable, lashed out in some way, said something we regret? If we think about what's happening, it's actually our nervous system's not well regulated, right? So we're kind of outside of our regulated state. And when we can pause and name it to tame it and use some of the breathing, it helps us to come back into this regulated state. I have a lot of compassion, which we're going to talk about in a moment, because when our poor nervous system is overloaded, we don't do that well, right? I've been trying to think about that. Even like when you see people that are really angry, I think about road rage, right? It just feels like there's a lot of road rage these days. I'm in New England and Connecticut, and people are always driving through. So in Connecticut, we're in between New York and Boston. So a lot of people are driving through the state and they're driving really, really fast. And we often see a lot of road rage these days. Anyway, what I'm thinking about, I could get angry. I have a tendency to want to get mad back, right? Because that's kind of our instinct if someone cuts you off or is following you, trailing you. But I often think about, oh, what's happening in their nervous system? So someone who has road rage, who's driving aggressively, their nervous system's not well regulated, right? And so what I can do, I can't make them stop doing that, but I can regulate my own so I'm not responding. So the more that we're regulated, it can help diffuse situations so that, all right, I'm just going to get over to that right lane. I'm not going to flip them off. I'm not going to do something, outrageous. I can control my own reactivity and help my nervous system. So, all right. And so these are just these techniques, and I often will do this when I'm noticing my reactivity level is up. So now, it's very helpful. Now, if I'm in a car and this is happening, right, I'll focus just on my jaw or my shoulders, right? I'm driving, so I'm not going to do my feet and legs. But like, if you can notice in your body where the tension is and see if you can just relax, if it's possible, what's happening in your body, that gives you another window to regulate the nervous system. So paying attention to breathing can regulate the nervous system. Naming the experience can regulate. And then this body awareness also can help regulate. So the simple act of noticing your feet, your legs, your hands, your jaw, your shoulders. I would sometimes add in belly too. Just noticing. And when someone's really upset, if I'm, working with somebody who's in maybe a panicky moment, I will often suggest, like, let's notice your feet right now on the floor. Notice the chair and your legs being supported. Can you relax your hands or just place your hands together in your lap? Can you open and relax the jaw? Bring the shoulders down away from the ears. So I'm giving that body cues because our body is another way, just like our breathing, our body and holding tension in the body is another way to help our brain regulate. So if we can relax the body, the brain begins to recognize, oh, we're not in a fight, flight, freeze state. Okay. It just helps us be. So that's our third practice, which is just doing a simple body awareness. You can see a theme in all of these things, whether it's name it to tame it or breathing or body awareness. It asks us to pay attention. When we're on autopilot, which means basically we're just going and going, and for many of you, care providers especially, you're on autopilot. You're quickly trying to get one thing done, one thing done, one thing done. And this helps to go off autopilot, off cruise control, and back into the body. Because on autopilot, we might be efficient, but we also might really be holding a lot of tension and stress. So we can be in that fight, flight, freeze, maybe more fight, flight, mobilized state for a prolonged period of time, high levels of stress, be accomplishing a lot and not feel very good. And so the alternative is to take these pauses so that you could still do those tasks, but with less tension and more nervous system regulation. All right. So, why does this all work? Well, number one, it helps our brains to be more flexible. Something called neuroplasticity. It's a really big topic in neurology and neuropsychology and psychology because the idea used to be that our brains were what they were. And especially if there was damage to the brain, if someone had a stroke, a brain injury, or had a ongoing neurodegenerative condition. The idea was like, well, the brain is what it is. It's not going to improve. It may just get worse. What we know is that we can increase this idea of plasticity, which means being able to create new patterns in the brain, new patterns. It doesn't mean parts of the brain that were damaged may suddenly become undamaged, but it means we're using our full brain and we're using parts of the brain that can help us feel better. So, neuroplasticity refers to this capacity to use parts of the brain that help us calm and regulate better. And when we calm and regulate better, we feel better, right? And so we can start to feel the benefits of that. The key is that we have to do it regularly. So I'm sure many of you have tried breathing and some of the techniques I've even saying today. It's not new, but it's keeping it up, right? And so the habit piece is important because if we're able to do some brief daily practices on a regular basis, we're changing how our brains are functioning. We're changing the network and the signals between the different parts of the brain. So little bits, I think about them as snacks, mindfulness snacks, right? Where we're just taking opportunities during the day, how we wake up in the morning, how we approach different tasks, how we handle stressors, how we close the evening, how we regulate or co-regulate with our partners. These are all these opportunities to practice. All right, the final piece I want to share today is this idea of self-compassion, because this also helps with resiliency. Self-compassion is this idea of bringing kindness to yourself. And what we find is that it's not about weakness. Some people feel like, oh, if I feel it's like feeling sorry for myself. It's not. It's really about bringing kindness in when there's a tough moment, giving yourself grace. I love that expression because that's really what self-compassion is. And what we find is that it can reduce shame and burnout for care providers. To be able to acknowledge you're having a tough time is really important. And it can essentially build more resilience. What we find is that this is especially for care partners, you are often giving lots of empathy to your person that you're caring for and other family members, etc. And that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and depleted, right? Because you're just putting your heart in and getting really distressed. When we bring compassion in, it's a little bit different than empathy. Empathy is feeling someone else's feelings, right? So it's like really a visceral, like if someone's feeling pain, we feel their pain. And this is very true for our children, our caregivers, our partners, our pets, right? We just feel. But compassion, we bring in what we call more of a caring with steadiness. So sometimes there's boundary setting with compassion, taking time for yourself, right? I was working with a care provider who had a partner who really needed a lot of help. And she was getting so overtired and over hungry. And she said, but if I take time to make my lunch, something could happen. He gets upset. And I said, well, what about making sure, reminding him he's safe in this moment, making sure he's all set up, and then asking him, is it okay, I'm going to take 15, 20 minutes for myself, and starting to create a pattern where she could set a boundary and make sure she ate because she really needed to eat. She get low blood sugar, and it was just hard for her to feel like she could do that safely, and they were able to work on that. In fact, he was really happy that she took the time for herself because she was really, really getting irritable and feeling terrible while trying to care for him. So self-compassion acknowledges that there's some difficulty. It's not pretending there's not, but there's also a taking care of oneself that helps. So how do we do this? Well, self-compassion has three components to it. One is self-kindness, how we talk to ourselves. The second is mindfulness, recognizing when you need support, by even noticing how you're feeling in the body, your breath, and then recognizing you're not alone, which is what I love about groups and support groups and working with people to realize other people feel this way, right? So when we bring self-compassion in, which is talking to ourselves kindly, taking a pause, being mindful, finding yourself not alone, right? Whether reaching out to people or just recognizing other people feel like this too, can reduce all of these conditions here. can increase satisfaction, resilience. Okay. So essentially, we need to talk to ourselves nicely. And so I'm going to be sending you these, but it's really good to practice self-compassion phrases because we often talk to ourselves in a very harsh way. Oh, why am I doing this? Oh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did this. I'm this, I'm that, right? Our inner dialogue can be really negative. And so we need to practice self-compassion, right? And so that's why I write out these phrases for people, and you might have your own that you use, but think about how you might pick one of these. It's okay to feel this way. I'm doing the best I can. This is hard. I can get through it. My feelings are valid. So these phrases are important to say to yourself often, 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 because our negative dialogue can actually make us feel less regulated in our nervous system. So you can write or take a few. So maybe picking one of these, writing it down. Again, you'll get these slides. And really thinking about what is a compassion phrase you can use when you're upset. You can have it, on a sticky or in your phone, but just what is a compassion phrase you can say to yourself? And then we can add in, this is our final practice, we can add in soothing touch. So we can bring a hand to the heart or hand on the back of the neck. And we can even say that phrase to ourselves, like, I'm doing the best I can. This is a difficult moment. And when we bring touch to our system, we relax, just like punch the monkey. When you get hugged by the monkey, we can do our own soothing touch, or we can hold hands with our loved one, but any kind of physical contact is soothing, can be soothing, as long as it's something that you find nurturing, right? But I like hand on the heart, and I often will take that. You can combine that with a little bit of the breathing and then a self-compassion phrase. So that's this practice that can be another opportunity for nervous system regulation during the day. A kind phrase, soothing touch, and acknowledging the difficulty without judging yourself. That's the key. So not adding on, I shouldn't have done this, I should be better, but just to recognize this is a moment of struggle. This is hard. This is hard today. And then finally, this is really toward the end, this idea of just practicing how you're talking to yourself. What am I telling myself? Is there another kinder, more balanced view and an action that aligns with your values? And this is what I often do with people in psychotherapy, helping people identify their thoughts, bringing in a balanced perspective, and then helping people come up with an action step that helps them feel more in balance. So we're targeting our breath and our body. That's the body part, our mind, right? Which is this part, mind, body. And then we might even say spirit with our self-compassion, right? This idea of not feeling alone, this idea of recognizing and giving ourselves grace. So that's where my integrative medicine background, I just love the idea of looking at all three systems in terms of resiliency. And finally, this is like a way to think about this. We want to have a three-step plan in daily life where we're regulating, naming our emotions, and helping when we're having negative thoughts to bring compassion or a cognitive reframe into the system. And so a daily plan might look like 2 minutes of breathing, a brief emotional labeling, one compassionate or value-based action. That's a little resiliency plan to consider. And then again, this caregiver piece, I want to really acknowledge caring. Caregivers, absolutely, this is for you as well. And your nervous system needs care as well. And the importance of really recognizing your need for support and your need for regulation. Yeah, and so I'm going to quickly wrap up so I can hear from any of you who have any questions or what stood out for you. And also just a plug in, if you are interested in Synapticure, we'd be happy to have you reach out and learn more about our programs. But I'm going to stop sharing and find out if anyone has questions or things that stood out or particular any of the practices that you thought, might be helpful. So please feel free to ask any questions that you might have.
So I'll say I really liked the breathing, the first one, the first breathing.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, I felt more relaxed there. Then I don't know, maybe it's just me. But when I like close my eyes, and maybe that's when like my anxiety kicks, like not being able to see.
yeah,
Like I thought the breathing, the first breathing was easier for me.
yeah.
Like feel more relaxed than
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And for all of us, each of us are going to have ones that feel like, that really works. For some people, like you said, closing your eyes, the mind starts to get really busy. Um, and so the good news is you get to customize this. There is not, you can't do it wrong. That's the good news. You can't do it wrong. And you may do a little experiment and say, oh yeah, actually eyes open, looking outside in nature, that helps. And I can do that, I can regulate that way. So the question always is, what helps my particular system soothe? Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's kind of the key, what you said. Everybody's different and there's no wrong way
Yeah.
to do it.
There isn't. And I've worked with people that have never done, mindfulness or body awareness. And we might start with more of the cognitive strategies of like noticing your thoughts. What's a gentler way to say that to yourself? So I love the idea we can start with our thoughts. We can start with how we're feeling in our body, and we could start with our breath. Any of those entry points can help with resilience. Oh, there's a question here. Um, how might breathing exercises complement physical therapy, speech therapy, or Parkinson's treatments? Yeah, that's a great question. And they do, and you'll see some overlap. Those of you who are in PT or speech, you may notice, I know with speech, often there's this idea of taking some long, slow breaths before speaking to help. Certainly with physical therapy and movement, the more that we can notice what's happening in our bodies, and really slow things down, it could be so helpful. So breathing is such a nice accompaniment to any rehab modality. And your therapist may already be doing that, or you can ask them, hey, can I do some mindful breathing with this? You're in a stretch, you're in a movement. And even the soothing touch you're getting in a PT, if they're doing some manualized treatment, can be really, really soothing for the nervous system. So it's a great question. So they dovetail really well. And many rehab professionals have this holistic approach now. So if they don't, you can ask them about it. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, we've got another question. Um, or comment. I sometimes forget about soothing touch, and physical touch is my love language. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. Also, are you familiar with the mentor program run through NCHPAD, National Health Center and Physical Disability? I'm not, Melissa. I will definitely check that out. Um, I'm really appreciating what you're saying about love language, right? That soothing touch, physical touch, not only can it be regulating for our nervous system, it may be the way that we show care for self and others. So I love that. And that's again a way to customize and tailor things for yourself. Like that's like your particular love language. So it's going to probably really work well to include that. All right. Great.
I don't know. Do we have any more questions? I know we're a little past time, so I want to be cognizant of that for you, Dr. Myers. And really, if anyone has any questions, you can still type them in the chat or email me and we can get with Dr. Myers and get you the answers that you need. But I thank you so very much for joining us. It was a very calming and relaxing hour.
Great. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to meet you all and hope we can connect again. So thank you again, Ellen.
Yes, absolutely. And as we mentioned at the beginning, everyone will get a recording or an email of the recording sent to you here probably by the end of the week, hopefully, if not next week. So thank you very, very much, Dr. Myers, and thank you all for attending, and we will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.